Hi guys, it's Aoife from Words of Clover and I am here to talk about all the books I read in December. Looking at the list of books I actually read in December, it was a really good reading month for me, and I'm going to try and go through these and tell you what I think about them in as quick a manner as possible. I did do a vlog reading Christmas books during the month of December, so I won't talk about those books in length, and I will leave a link to that vlog if you want to see me talk about those books and delve deeper into those thoughts as I was reading them. So the first book I finished in December, this was I kind of started this the very end of November and finished it very early December, and that was The Winter Garden by Heidi Swain. This is the third book in her Nightingale Square trilogy. At the moment, I don't know if she'll have more books in it, but we are following a character called Freya who is a gardener, and she gets employed to look after the gardens in this Nightingale Square, this house that's there. It's kind of like a public, it's privately owned, but then it's like a public place for people to visit, and a nice park, a nice day out kind of thing. And she is employed to be this gardener, and she moves her life there, and she kind of just gets involved in the community, and then she also kind of gets involved with this local painter sculptor guy who is there, and the two of them kind of get off to a bad start, and then during the book they kind of warm up to each other. So we have this nice little romance blossoming for Freya as well throughout the book. This was like all the other Heidi Swain books that I've read. It was sweet, it was nice, there's nothing spicy, there's nothing really dramatic about Heidi Swain's books. They're on an even keel for the entire plot. There's no ups and downs really with it, or if they're very minor ups and downs. So I do find, while they're enjoyable reads, I don't find myself excited, I don't find myself really surprised by anything that happens in her books ever. So they're always just nice reads, but they're never extremely memorable, or they're not ones that I would gush to people about. So yeah, this was a three-star read. It was grand, and yeah, I enjoyed it. The next book I read was The Winter of Second Chances by Jenny Bayliss. Jenny Bayliss actually wrote one of my favourite Christmas books last year, which was the 12 Dates of Christmas, and that one I absolutely loved. This one, we're actually following a character who is a little bit older. I think she's in her late 50s, early 60s, married for a long time. She had children young, she got married very young. She's had a business, a really successful restaurant business. She is a chef, and then she ends up discovering her husband cheating for the umpteenth time, and she eventually decides enough is enough. Her children are grown, they're out of the nest, she doesn't need to stay for them anymore, and she decides that she's finally going to do what she wants to do for herself, and she kind of completely exits herself away from her husband, away from her business, and goes off and finds something completely new for herself to do. So she ends up coming across this tiny little town and this cottage on the side, basically on the side of a cliff, and that needs someone to look after it. And there's also kind of a closed cafe / coffee kiosk there that she can run if she wants to. So she starts getting involved in the community, and starts kind of picking herself up, kind of relearning who she is, and finally on her own after years and years of looking after others and being kind of mistreated by a lot of people in her life, particularly her husband. And then she also kind of starts a small relationship with some people in the town as well, romantically. Yeah, I really enjoyed following a character, kind of an older character like that, a character who's going through a really big change in her life, and a character who's really discovering herself again and really grasping things for herself again. And I really enjoyed that journey. I think particularly as women, I think women tend to sacrifice a lot to their own detriment sometimes, and I loved this woman who was finally saying enough is enough. I'm going to do what I want to do, and I'm finally going to take my own life back, and I'm not going to let people walk all over me anymore. And I really enjoyed seeing that within this book. One of the things that I think Jenny Bayliss just completely excels at, she did it in 12 Dates, she did it in this one, is she creates the most amazing communities in her books, the most amazing little villages and towns, and places with history and places with relationships, and people who you really believe can live in these towns. And I just loved that. I loved reading and immersing myself. I wish them to be real, because I'd either love to live in them or be able to visit them. And yeah, I just really love this one. I don't think this was as strong as 12 Dates. I definitely got a little bit bored of the story, or it didn't do as much for me as 12 Dates did, but I still did really enjoy this, and I do think it is a strong read, and I think a lot of people would really like it. So I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. The next book I read after that is The Duke and I, which is the first Bridgerton book by Julia Quinn. I was reading this because I was watching the last few episodes of Bridgerton, about a year behind everyone else, of course. But I decided that I wanted to try and read the source material before kind of finishing the series off, and this was like fine for me. This is set in like Regency romance. It's set in historical period London, and we are following a girl called Daphne, and she is trying to find herself a husband, and then she ends up kind of coming up with a plan with her brother's friend Simon about how they can pretend to kind of be interested in each other to ward away the mothers and daughters for him, and then attract suitors for her. But then things kind of go awry, and they end up, you know, falling in love, but also being forced into marriage. And Simon never wanted to marry. There are reasons why he didn't want to marry. He doesn't want to marry. He doesn't want to produce a child, and this is a really big issue for him. And we see this kind of be a real issue for their relationship as well going forward. So like, I liked this. I think it was fine. The romance was fine. There's definitely some questionable scenes in it around consent and things like that. And like the whole thing around the child, and that he didn't want a child, he didn't want to produce an heir, and then Daphne's kind of her wish and her love for a family. I think that could get a bit much for people, particularly anyone who might be struggling with fertility, or for people who choose to remain childless. Like, I think there is, in these books, there is always an emphasis that a child is the end game, a family is the end game, and that's all you should want, and you're successful if you have children and you have heirs and things like that. And, you know, we know now, like, that's not what success is. You can be perfectly happy being a family of two. I think some of the things around that just kind of made me roll my eyes a little bit, if you know what I mean. And I did find this just really lacking in comparison to how colourful and lively the show is. I think the show outshone the source material. I think it ran with the show really well, bringing in all the different characters. I think was done really well. So I missed all those characters that I've come to know from the show in this book. I will be carrying on with the series because I want to read like the other Bridgerton's books. This was fine for me. This is like a 2.5, like a low 3-star read for me. I felt a little bit bleh about the whole thing. And then luckily I read a book that I absolutely loved, and that was The Girl in the Tower by Katherine Arden. This is the second book in the Bear and the Nightingale trilogy, and in this book we are following a girl called Vasya who is growing up in 1900s Russia, and she is born with kind of a special gift where she's able to see the magical creatures that live around her village and in her forest, and these old magical creatures that Russian people used to they used to believe in, and they used to like leave things out for them, and they used to worship them in a way. Now we're seeing Christianity creep in, and people are starting to move away from these old tales and the old folklore, and they're believing Christianity, and these creatures are kind of being left to, you know, dwindle out. And Vasya, she can see them, she believes in them, but people see her strangely because of that. And she's on her own journey. Like, she is a young girl who, you know, isn't made for marriage and children and like settling down, and she has people in her life who want her to do that. So in this book we are following a fallout of Vasya kind of going out and seeking her own fortune, and we are seeing her come to Moscow. Ends up actually pretending to be a boy for a majority of this book, so there's kind of like a Mulan-esque feel to this, where people believe that she is a boy, and we see her being able to do loads of things that she wouldn't be able to do if they knew that she was a girl, especially as like women at this time were treated like, you know, they had to kind of stay in the home, and like they kind of like, you know, seen but not heard, and like hardly ever seen at that. There's just so much love, like magic and folklore and amazing scenes in this. I just love Katherine Arden's writing so much, and I loved how she brought Moscow to life. I love how she brought the Russian folklore to life, and yeah, there's just something really magical about this book that I just fall in love with every time I read it. And yeah, I just love it so much, and I can't wait to get to the third and final book in the trilogy, but I also don't want it to be over. But yeah, I'm just really looking forward to reading on and like being with Vasya again and seeing what else she gets up to, because yeah, this was just so good. So this was a 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I finished was an audiobook, and that was Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. This is a really magical middle grade book about a little girl called Amari who her brother has gone missing, and no one knows what's happened to him, and she's really worried. And then one day she gets this mysterious message from her brother, and she ends up being brought into this special summer camp for kids that ends up being like a magical academy, and she is brought in to start training as kind of this special magical agent, and it turns out that her brother was one of these magical agents. That is partly why he is now missing. He was on like a particular case, and now like no one knows what has happened to him. Amari decides to use some of her new abilities and things that she's learning to like try and find out what happened to her brother, while also getting into all sorts of trouble and mischief and like new friends, and learning all sorts of things about the supernatural world that she never knew existed. Really enjoyed this one. This one was just so much fun and magical, and I just loved following along with Amari as she like discovered this world and the different like bits and pieces within the academy itself that she is attending, and like those little things that, like, you know, if you were a kid and reading it, it would just completely like blow your mind. I just loved it. Like, you know, the elevators in this building, they all had like specific personalities, and they like depending on like what floor they liked to go to, and they would talk to the kids like going into them, and I just thought that was such like a really like fun, like I just thought that was such a fun thing. And then also there's like so many different floors to do like different departments that are like really fun when like they're described, and I just think like kids would just get such a blast out of this as adults, because like I really enjoyed it. It was really good in audiobook. As I said, I listened to an audiobook and I thought that was really good. And I also think that if you like Nevermore by Jessica Townsend, this is 100% like up your alley. You would definitely like this. The difference is that like with this as well, Amari, she's like a young black girl who has grown up in the projects, and like she has things to say about that, about how she's been treated, about prejudice. She has like a really like unique experience, different to a lot of the kids that she is like now attending this summer camp with, and we see her use that to her advantage as well, but also try and educate people at the same time. And I really love that. I just think, yeah, it's just such a lovely book, and I definitely cannot wait for the next book, which is coming out this year. So yeah, I'll be reading that as soon as it comes out, because I really enjoyed this one and I gave it a really strong 4 out of 5 stars. So then I'm into the books that I read during my Christmas vlog week, and I will just go through these and let you know what I rated them, because yeah, I've talked a lot about these in the vlog already. So the first book was Stay Another Day by Juno Dawson. This is a book I was reading for Lauren in the Books Christmas Patreon book club of the lot, which I never even ended up watching the live show, which I was reading the book for. It just completely slipped my mind. I ended up missing it. But I did enjoy this one. It's just not my favourite Juno Dawson, so I gave this a 3.5 stars. Then I read Love Notes in Reindeer Falls by Beth LaBonte, and this is one that like a really simple story, like kind of a romance, a girl kind of going home and like realizing that she doesn't need to be anywhere else but home, and that's where, you know, everything lies for her. This was 3 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed it. It was sweet, nothing too crazy. This week as well I read Calling Mrs. Christmas by Carole Matthews, and this is one that ended up being a really surprising read for me. I did actually enjoy it a lot more than I thought I would, and I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars, or 3.5 to 4 out of 5 stars. There were some things in it that really annoyed me. There was a cheating element in this that a lot of people wouldn't like, but overall I did actually really enjoy the start of this, the writing in it as well, and some of the storylines with other characters I thought were really good in this too. So I ended up really enjoying this, surprisingly. Then I read Every Day in December by Kitty Wilson. This one I gave 3.5, 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this one. Again, just a sweet Christmassy wintry romance. This one I would describe it a little bit like a Lorelai Gilmore, Luke Danes Gilmore Girls-esque type of pairing, and about a girl who loves Christmas, a guy who doesn't really like Christmas for like specific reasons, and she is trying to, you know, get the Christmas spirit back alive in him and show him the magic of Christmas. And there was just a lot of fun moments in this, and I did quite enjoy it. And then I read The Christmas Escape by Sarah Morgan. I actually can't remember if I talked about this in my vlog. I don't think I did, or I think I at least started it. And this one is actually set in Lapland. We are following a character called Alex who has to travel to Lapland with her best friend's daughter, while her best friend stays behind for a few days to kind of work on her marriage a little bit. And Alex and this little girl are traveling with the husband's best friend, who Alex has a little bit of a past with, and it's a little bit, you know, like kind of almost like enemies to lovers type romance. And yeah, a lot of people have a lot of things to work out in this book, and some of them can do it while they're in Lapland, which is quite nice. This was fine. Like looking back on it now, like I don't think there was anything like really startling or like amazing about it. I enjoyed it for like the wintry setting. I love the Lapland, like Northern Lights, like you have to kind of love all of that. So I did enjoy all of that with it. I do think that it was a little bit maybe on the simpler side. I think some of the things that were resolved or like talked about, like I don't know, I think maybe there could have been more, like they could have gone more in depth about some things, but overall it was grand, and I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read The Christmas Secret by Swan. This was like my Christmassy audiobook for the month, and this one is about a girl possibly also called Alex, now that I think about it, and this, we're following this woman who is a business coach, and she ends up travelling to Scotland for a new job where she is basically trying to coach this CEO of this whiskey company who has not been making people very happy, and he is not happy to have her there. He doesn't want her there, he doesn't want to work with her, but he kind of has to because the board of his company are telling him that he has to. His name is Lachlan, and the more she works with him, the more she kind of learns about like this Scottish island that she's working on, the history of it. She kind of she kind of starts getting to know the community a little bit better, and she also starts like learning how this guy Lachlan, like there's a lot more to him that meets the eye, and he seems very aggressive and abrasive, but you know, there's something softer like deep down there. This one wasn't my favourite Swan of the last few years, but I still like enjoyed it for what it was. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. One of the things I love about Swan's books, like particularly her Christmassy books, are that she always has them in like different locations, and I think it's always really fun to learn about these different locations, and learn about like, you know, this Scottish island of Islay. Like it was just really nice being able to learn about that. The audiobook of this was also really nice because the audiobook narrator had this really lovely Scottish brogue, and like it was just this really like, it was the Scottish lilt that wasn't too strong that like you wouldn't be able to understand her. But yeah, I really enjoyed like listening to this because it was just so relaxing, listening to this lovely Scottish accent tell me this story. Also like learned lots about the whiskey business in this too. Like Swan also, like she really like gets into like different topics, and I think it's just really interesting. Must do like loads of research for the books that she writes. I did end up reading Swan's latest release, which was Midnight in the Snow by Karen Swan, obviously by Karen Swan, and this one I absolutely loved. This one was a 5 out of 5 stars for me. I just fell in love with this book. This book, we're following Clover, who is the head of this documentary team. She normally does documentaries around like sports stars, particularly fallen sports stars. She kind of like focuses on the underdog, and in this case she's kind of doing a little bit of the opposite, where she is going to Austria to follow this disgraced surfer turned snowboarder called Kit, and he was involved in an accident a few years previously surfing, where the other person involved in the accident, like they had life-changing injuries because of it, and now Kit is kind of labelled this like bad boy of like the sporting world. He has this like really bad reputation now attached to him. He's never talked about that incident, and she's hoping that she'll be able to get that out of him now during this documentary, but he is very reluctant to do so. He doesn't want to be involved in documentary, but it is his like management team and his sponsors that are pushing him into doing it. So they basically have to shadow him as he does his snowboarding training in Austria, and try and figure out like what is actually going on with him. And Clover like kind of gets closer and closer to him while she is trying to figure out like what it is that he's hiding. I just really love this one. I just really fell in love with like Clover herself as a character, but then also her dynamic with Kit, which was real kind of enemies to lovers, hate to love almost in a way. Like there was so much chemistry between the two of them from the very start. I just really loved like seeing that on page, and then seeing it slowly like unfurl, and them get closer and closer together while still hating each other, but then at the same time like they really didn't hate each other. And I just loved that whole thing. The way it played out was just so much fun. And then I just really love the snowboarding aspect of this. I know very little about snowboarding, but it was just really fun seeing that being like explored in this book too. It was a lovely setting. Now this is this is a Christmas release, but it's not a book about Christmas. Like Christmas is very minimal in this. It's just like a wintry setting, but you could read this at any point during the year. Yeah, this was kind of my like over the days of Christmas, like after the day like Christmas evening, and then the few days following Christmas. This is the book that I devoured, and I just was so into it, and I just loved it so much. So I gave it a really strong 5 out of 5 stars. I loved it. And then my last book of the year was Dances and Dreams on Diamond Street by Revel Horwood. This is a book that was gifted to me last year or the year before in 2020 by Kirsty over Kirsty's Reviews. I think it was for my birthday. And this is one that I didn't really know what to expect of, because obviously Craig Revel Horwood is a very well known like judge on Strictly Come Dancing. He's a professional dancer, he's like a celebrity, so I didn't really know like what to expect of this as like a celebrity book. To be honest, I wasn't really sure if he had written it himself or if it was ghost written. I think he has written it himself. And this is set in 1994, and we are following the residents of 27 Diamond Street, London, and they're kind of a group of kind of bohemians, I guess you would say. Like there's the dancers, a nurse, kind of poet, a lot of like eccentrics all in one house, and there's just a lot of like fun in this. This is a real found family type of story, where they all become each other's family. It's about being different, about accepting that difference, about finally finding a place that your difference is embraced and people accept you for exactly who you are. And there are like queer characters in this. There's a character who identifies as gender fluid, though he uses he him pronouns. There's not much exploration into that gender fluidity, but it is stated on the page that he is gender fluid. And this was just really fun. I just really enjoyed this one. For like, I think I read it all in like basically almost a day, less than 24 hours, and it was just really quick to fly through. It was just really enjoyable. There are definitely like some bits of around like repetition, like, you know, a scene could happen from one character's point of view and then you might get it rehashed when you switch to another character. That happened a couple of times. That could get a little bit boring, but other than that, I did really enjoy this one, and I think, yeah, it was just a lovely pleasant surprise. I ended up enjoying it more than I thought I would, so I gave it like a 3.5 to 4 stars, and it was a really nice way to end my reading year. Yeah, a really great month for me in December. If you guys read any of these books, what were your books that you read at the end of December? Did you have any books that like really like tided you over Christmas? What was your last book of the year? Was it a good one? I would love to know. Thank you guys so much for watching as always, and I'll see you guys again next time. Bye.